When I was a kid, I was always falling down, bumping into things, or just running into walls. Now, for me, that was just due to my own clumsiness and lack of spatial awareness. But for other kids, the constant falling, the lack of control, may have been because they had a rare genetic mutation called muscular dystrophy. I chose this topic because I wanted to inform people about a lesser known genetic mutation that disproportionately affects the growth and development of young children. Today, I'll be informing you about what muscular dystrophy is and how to identify it, the different types of muscular dystrophy, and finally, treatment options available for people with muscular dystrophy. Now, firstly, we have to ask, what exactly is muscular dystrophy and how do we identify it? According to the National Institute of Child and Human Development in November of 2020, muscular dystrophy is a group of diseases that causes progressive loss and weakness of muscle mass. In muscular dystrophy, abnormal genes interfere with the production of protein needed to form healthy muscle. Now, because of this, muscular dystrophy is distinguished from other forms of muscle weakness. Because in MD, the changes happen within the muscle itself, not the nerve endings. So, because of this, a person's nerve endings could be perfectly healthy, but they would still continue to lose muscle mass. The main cause of muscular dystrophy is a, the main cause of muscular dystrophy is a mutation on the X chromosome. Because of this, boys are disproportionately affected by muscular dystrophy because they only have one X chromosome. Because they only have one X chromosome. And while girls are not, because they have two. However, for girls, there's an underlying threat here. Because they're not affected the same way that boys are, they can become carriers of the gene instead and pass it down to future generations. Now that you have a better idea of what muscular dystrophy is, what causes it, and who it typically affects, let's move on to the different types of muscular dystrophies. Just like any other disease, muscular dystrophy has many forms that affect many people in many different ways. But the most common types of muscular dystrophy are dystropathinies. And they are divided between Duchenne MD, Becker MD, and congenital MD. And they are all result of a mutation within the dystrophin gene. The first type of muscular dystrophy is Duchenne MD. According to the Muscular Dystrophy Association, Duchenne MD occurs when a mutation is severe enough that it results in no protein being produced at all. Because of this, Duchenne is the most severe of the three main types of muscular dystrophies. Signs of Duchenne MD will appear in children around the ages of 2 to 3 years old. Because Duchenne MD appears in young children, most of the symptoms affect movement and development of young children, such as beginning to walk later in childhood, frequent falling, waddling gait, muscle pain and stiffness, as well as different learning disabilities. Now, moving on to the second type of the three main muscular dystrophies is Becker MD. Now, Becker MD occurs when the dystrophin gene is only misshapen, thus allowing some protein to be made and distributed throughout the body. Because some protein is being mated with Becker MD, it is not as severe as Duchenne MD, though some of the symptoms between Duchenne and Becker do overlap a fair bit, though they are not as severe. And the last type of the three main muscular dystrophies is congenital MD. Congenital MD usually presents at birth and can usually be identified in infants with reduced movements, trouble feeding because of the lack of muscles within their mouth, as well as respiratory failure. Now, those are not the only three types of muscular dystrophies. Here we have some other types of muscular dystrophies. that affect more specific and particular parts of the bodies. The first that we have is myopic dystrophies. Myopic dystrophy affects the facial and neck muscles and can cause the muscles within these areas to be, to be unable to relax after contractions. The next type of muscular dystrophies is FSHD. This usually affects the face, hip, and shoulder areas of the body. Lastly, there's limb girdle. This type of muscular dystrophy usually affects the usually affects the front usually affects the front part of the foot and the front part of the foot and causes frequent falling for these people. Now that you have an understanding of the different types of muscular dystrophies and how they affect the body, we can move on to some possible treatments for MD, as well as what you can do for those affected. While there's no cure for MD at the moment, the National Health Service, a publicly funded healthcare system in England, last reviewed July of 2021, found that there's a variety of different treatments available for people with MD. Some of these treatments include mobility and breathing assistance, steroid medicine, as well as support groups for people with similar conditions. These are just some of the many different options that are available to people with MD. However, because muscular dystrophy is such a broad and varied disease, treatment options will also vary wildly from person to person. So, throughout this course of my speech, I have informed you about what muscular dystrophy is and how to identify it, the different types of muscular dystrophy, and the different treatment options available to people who have muscular dystrophy. You can stop.